Peace, greetings to you all. It's your brother Nyhiem, BKA Lord Abbott, aka Mr. Just the Facts. That's all we do. That's all we do over here, family, is just the facts. So first, man, make sure y'all share this out. We're gonna have a serious discussion tonight, man. Make sure y'all share this link out. Send it to some people that you think might need to hear it, because we are engaged in political advocacy. And there are groups of people who want to distract from that mission. They have no political education. I don't think they really have any education, to be honest with you. They're not and have never been in the streets. We don't see any record of these people doing any activist work whatsoever. None, zero. So they have taken it upon themselves to try to throw a monkey wrench in the game. Try to distract us from this important work that we need to do to uplift our people. And while they're doing that, they are also hurting the Indian freedmen, meaning the Chickasaw Freedmen, the Choctaw Freedmen, the Cherokee Freedmen, the Seminole Freedmen, and the Muskogee Freedmen, because what they're doing is muddling up and muddying up their own personal justice fight against the 5 slaveholding tribes and other tribes that held our people as slaves as well. And we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about that. We have some family from the Chickasaw Freedmen who are going to come in a minute and speak. First, I want to bring my brother Ali and my brother Grim in. And let me mute Grim out real quick. So, fam, let me give some shout outs. I see everybody in the chat. Conjure Chris 9, our BTP brother. Logic is in the building. Peace, bro. Vince Jefferson plugged in as usual. My brother Dre, let's go Freedman. It's a Freedman thing tonight.
because that's what we are. And the crazy thing is, the people that are pretending to be Indians, well, they're freedmen too. And I mean American freedmen. They're just pretending like they're not because they're ashamed of their own history and their own heritage. Brother Ali, did you want to say anything to the people? You know, yeah, definitely peace to all the 85ers, you know, the fake aboriginals and the indigenous people out there. We'll call out. See,
Yeah, I just want to say, just reiterate, peace to the 85ers. That's why we
and,
here to educate the, the deaf, dumb, and the blind. But but
you know,
but also, first and foremost, peace to the Freedman family, one love. That's what I want to say.
indeed. Brother Grimm, you had anything you want to say before we bring our guests on? All right. So without further ado, let us bring our guests on. Y'all could show yourselves or not. I'm not sure how y'all want to do it. We prefer, the fan be on the camera. I think people need to see, yeah, that's right. Let's show the family, our brother and our beautiful sister. Starting with you, sister. Introduce yourself, and then we're gonna go to your fam, and we're gonna get this thing moving. And not just introduce yourself. Tell them your tribal affiliation and how you got that tribal affiliation.
Okay, hey everybody. My name's Janai. You guys may know me on Twitter as the Body Butter Plug. Um, I'm connected to the Chickasaw Freedmen. My third great grandfather, Richard Davis, he was enslaved by the Chickasaw Nation. So that is the ties that I have to them. This is my cousin Ian. We're connected through Richard Davis's wife, Ella Franklin. So I did want to bring him on here so he can go ahead and shed light on what's going on.
So you know your history basically, and you're gonna show that tonight. All
Yep.
right, cool. All right, so let me see. I'm trying to. All right, that's a little bit better. If you could adjust your camera a little bit, sis. Just a little. All right, there you go. That's a little bit better. All right, go ahead, brother Ian. Introduce yourself. Let the people know, a little bit about yourself and your familial connections going back to to the Chickasaw Freedmen.
Chokma, sa Hustafua Ian McCants, Oklahoma City Ako Amintali, Micha Chata, Micha Chikasha Ikyoko Saya. Hi, my name is Ian McCants. I'm from Oklahoma City, and I'm a Choctaw and Chickasaw Freedman. I'm related to the Franklin family, the Love family, the Newberry family from the southeastern or the southern part of Oklahoma. My family were co-founders of Tatum's, which is an all-black town and the only all-black town in the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma. And it's one of 13 all-black towns in the state of Oklahoma. And my family has been living in Oklahoma since the 1840s with the Trail of Tears when they went to the bottom of Oklahoma on the Red River where all of the plantations that Chickasaw slave owners were from Mississippi, where they had been previously living before the Trail of Tears in the Chickasaw Nation.
Oh, perfect. That's beautiful. And I want everybody to notice how the brother came in and he spoke the language, right? And one of the things that we've asked these pretendians, and I'm gonna try to keep it, but we just gotta call these people what they are. Pretend Indians. We asked them, what language do you? It's this guy named Mel. Like, let's call a couple names, right? Secure the tribe, right? So we first come in contact with this guy because there's a space called Natives versus Freedmen. And this was sent to us, and we're looking like, what is this? Natives versus Freedmen. So we jump into space, try to get a gauge of what's going on. I request to go up to speak because I want to see what these people are talking about. So I engage them in the conversation. Mel and the rest of them guys that's on that panel. And let me see. What is I'm trying to look at the chat. Okay, I'll get to the chat in a minute. So yeah, you were saying something, Ali?
No. Go ahead.
All right.
Go on.
So I start asking questions that these brothers couldn't answer. Brothers and sisters, like KD and the rest of these people. um, uh, uh, their answers, their responses is to curse you out, mute you, and kick you off their Twitter space stage because they have no answers. They won't come up here and give an account, just like legendary Chief Top Cats. Although he did come on here, we proved him to be a habitual liar. Showed and proved that legendary Chief Top Cap, not cat, cap, because he be capping, he's a liar. Ishmael Bay. We've invited all of these people to come on this platform and have the discussion, or a neutral platform like Sinetta. So anyway, let's get back to the space, and we're going to get to the guests. I just want to tell people kind of how we got here. And so I asked the brother Mel a series of questions. If you're saying that you have no slave ancestors on either side, your mother's side or your father's side, going up your family tree, which comes out as, you got two parents on one side, two parents on the other side.
You mean grandparents?
Huh?
Grandparents.
That's right.
Okay.
Which right, the four grandparents, like it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, right? So I asked, can you tell me when your family intersects with the European prior to them bringing slaves to the United States of America? Ask a series of questions. Can't answer the question. Can you prove that you are an Indian, a native? I don't have to prove nothing to you. I feel it in my DNA. This is what he told me. I feel it in my DNA that I am Indian, a black Indian. And there's been a series of discussions that we've had debates. They don't want to debate. They just want you to come into their rooms where they could control the mic, curse you out, kick you off the stage, cornball stuff. Like real cat. I don't like now I said I never brag how real I keep it because it's the best secret. But we don't like to brag about how real we are. We don't gotta do that. But when you see fake stuff, you gotta speak to it. Sorry, man. Stuff is a distraction. All of this stuff is a distraction. So we're gonna go. Let's start with our sister. And say your name again, sis, because I'm gonna keep messing it up till I get it.
It's okay. It's Janai.
Janai. Sister, we want to start with Sister Janai. And brothers, if y'all have any questions y'all want to ask before to the sister and to the brother, before she leans into her presentation, please do so.
Well, the only thing I would ask is, well, I don't really have a question. The only thing I would say is that, and I'm sure the sister's well aware, what you're talking about in terms of how things have been transpiring on social media. It's just a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, and what's very, very interesting about the whole thing is that I was just looking at somebody's comment in the chat where he was saying, you all can't be that dumb. Black people are Aboriginal everywhere. But what the reason that this even happened, and they think that this is some new stuff. I'm just gonna tell y'all, this kind of debate for me personally, I've found stuff going back 2017, I believe, questioning Dane Calloway all the way back to 2017 when I think he was the one that was making the comments that African Americans aren't African, etc. Right? And so, for me, it's not a new conversation. For a lot of these people, this is something that just came up for them like yesterday. They're just kind of discovering this stuff, but
they don't know we've been debunking this stuff for years, Ali.
been dealing with it for a long time. And let me just say this, right? One of the things that I said even when Top Cat was here, and I'm going to reiterate it because I think it's important that people understand this. No one's saying, well, I'm not saying that black Americans don't have any Native American ancestry, because I can't make that kind of statement. I'm not qualified to make that statement. I've not done the genealogy of every individual to affirmatively say we don't have any of that in our ancestry. It, so I'm not denying that, but what I'm saying is what they're doing is they've come into the reparations conversation. Mind you, we're having a conversation about reparations for Black Americans. What they did was they came into the conversation and started telling everybody, you're not really Black Americans, you're really American Indians. And so this is kind of where this thing spirals from. It comes from this whole thing of them imposing themselves into certain spaces and then trying to make these false generalizations about 40 million people and telling them that you're really American Indians and you don't have any African ancestry, because guess what? You can't find any slave ships. So I just wanted to say that, and I'm sure you're well aware of these kinds of comments and stuff like that. And I'm sure you're going to address a lot of that stuff as you go through your presentation as well, sis. Peace.
Indeed. I want to. But, oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Grim. Go ahead, Grim.
Yeah, sorry, I was having some technical difficulties, but I would like to thank the guests for coming on. I appreciate our Indian freedmen brothers and sisters joining the American freedmen, brothers and sisters, because basically when we started talking about the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen, a lot of people, a lot of our detractors or whatnot try to cause a lot of confusion. And I have to talk about this real quick. So basically, they tried to start a lot of confusion because we were calling ourselves freedmen, and they were basically saying, no, y'all not the freedmen. The Choctaw and the Chickasaw people are the real freedmen, knowing that we weren't calling ourselves freedmen because we were claiming to be Indian freedmen. We were calling ourselves freedmen because we come from the other side of the coin. And I don't want to jump the gun here, but basically the sister and the brother that's on, they're basically our cousins, brothers and sisters, but they were only beholden to the quote unquote semi-sovereign or sovereign nations of the Native Americans, the people who possibly own their ancestors. And us as American freedmen, we're the people that's the descendants of the actual people who were beholden to the United States of America. For example, the rich politicians and the plantation owners. So we all freedmen, but they are Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cherokee freedmen, and they are American freedmen. So, I just wanted to say that before the sister come in. I appreciate y'all. This was long overdue.
All right.
Long overdue.
I'm going to turn it over to them, but I want to do one thing. I want to do one thing before we turn it over to our freedmen cousins. Where's that? Okay, still Coppertone. Let's pull this up. We're going to address this right now. Okay, so this is an image. Let's pull this up. And then we're going, because there's a reason why we get to this thing, right? So you have people like Dane Calloway, who, for instance, because of his skin complexion, even the skin complexion of the guy in the picture, that believes that this is what they meant by copper tone, and that our skin is not dark skin as an original people. So how do we become lighter, especially here in the United States of America? It's usually due to mixing in with white folks who were raping us, and in the case of our freedmen cousins, mixing in with the Native Americans here, right? But when they're saying copper tone, you can see what they mean, right? And we can look at what natives from the Americas look like in conjunction with the actual copper coin. Because one of the things that they do, fam, this is one of the tricks. They take a dirty penny and put it on their hand and say pennies are copper. See, look at this brown penny. And I want you all to just think about it the next time you see a penny. If you put that sucker in some turpentine and you clean it off, it's going to look just like this copper coin that's on the screen. Let me show one more thing. Okay, the reason why they use that is this 1828 Webster's Dictionary, right? So it says American. Now, a native of America originally applied to the Aboriginals. Aboriginals are copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. The name American must always exalt. That's nothing. The thing that they don't tell you is that in this same book, the same dictionary, there's a definition for Negro. Negro. It is remarkable that our common people retain the exact Latin pronunciation as is the word, negger, a native or descendant of the black race of men in Africa. The word is never applied to the tawny or olive-colored inhabitants of the northern coast of Africa, but to the more southern race of men who are quite black. That goes back to the copper color thing. They would have never called the people copper color had they been dark-skinned. They would have simply called them Negroes based on the fact that they viewed dark brown skin as black. There's another entry in this 1828 Webster's Dictionary. More, meaning dark and obscure. A native of the northeast coast of Africa called by the Romans from the color of the people. Mauritania, the country of dark-complexioned people. The same country is now called Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, etc. So this idea that we get copper colored from this 1828 Webster's Dictionary to apply to those of us here who are the freedmen, black folk, Negroes, colored folk, African Americans, whatever names we have been given in this country is completely absurd and preposterous. So now, sister,
I gotta add.
Janae. Okay, go ahead, brother.
I had a definition from that same dictionary, same year, 1828, that I wanted to share when it came to that.
Okay, definitely.
It's the definition in that 1828 dictionary for copper, a metal of pale red color tinged with yellow. They were not describing black folks. They were not describing.
Oh, that's a good one. I didn't even think to look at that one. Excellent.
So when we talk about the color copper, that's not the skin tones that people are trying to make copper represent aren't the skin tones of the definition in the 1828 census. So y'all can throw that point right out the window.
Thank you, brother. Powerful. Powerful. All right, sister Janae. I got it now. I ain't going to. Huh? Janae.
See, he still messed it up.
All right, sister Janae. Sister Janae. All right, let's go, sis. If you want to lead into anything before you do your PowerPoint, you're welcome to the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and go into the PowerPoint. Give me 1 second, y'all.
All right, while she's doing
the screen.
All right, yeah, just hit that share button, and then I'll pull it up on my end. I'm gonna pull up Mark Daniels' comment while you're doing that. It says, if Be the Power starts joining with the real black native / tribal affiliated freedmen, the abos, meaning the aboriginals, are in trouble. Only but so long that fake-ish they've been pushing online can last. Exactly. This is a call that we've been put out to build with our freedmen cousins of the various tribes. So I just wanted to read that. Sis, when you hit the share button, I'll see it on my end, and then I'll be able to pull it up.
Okay,
there we go. Yeah, go ahead, Ali, real quick.
No, let her go in. I don't want to delay it.
Okay. All right, so we have your PowerPoint up. So I don't know if you can make that a little bit bigger. I'm not sure. Also, that bar at the bottom. Okay, no, you can't make it bigger. All right, that's cool. That bar at the bottom. Oh, you can make it bigger.
Do you want me? I can see if I can make it. I don't know.
I mean, well, if it's an inconvenience, I mean, we'll get through it. If it's too blurry, then you could go back to the original
That's it right
Zoom
there.
size.
That's good. What you just had, it was good.
And that bar at the bottom that says stop sharing, you could click and drag that and move it out the way if it's in the way of any text that you're trying to share as well.
Okay, I don't know how it's gonna look on here. I tried to make it bigger. Can you guys see it, or it's still
Yeah,
small?
it's cool. It's cool. We're good. We can see it. We can
Okay.
see it.
So I just wanted to talk about the Chickasaw Freedmen. These are my ancestors right here. On the first column, Richard Davis and Ella Davis here on the Freedmen roll with their children. And it says right here, from the late 18th century through the end of the Civil War, Choctaw and Chickasaw Indians bought and sold enslaved Africans. So this is an ad right here from 1859 in the Chickasaw Nation, showing that they were looking for Negro boys and girls to buy. Here is the dolls rolls. I do hear a lot of people talk about the dolls rolls like it's a bad thing, calling people $5 Indians, saying that people pay $5 to be on the roll. I'm not sure if people know, but it was an ad that went out worldwide, and people were trying to get land even if they didn't have ties to Native Americans. I did see on my paternal grandmother's side, on her father's folks, they were even trying to enroll to get land, knowing that they had no ties to the Chickasaw Nation, and their application was denied. So doing my research, here's my third great grandfather, Richard Davis, in Oklahoma in Indian Territory. You see him with his spouse and his children, also the name of his mother and father. So when I click on the actual picture, it pops up of the actual Freedmen roll. You see Richard, Ella, and their children. You can also see who their slave owner is, Agnes Love and Nancy Smith, and the day that they were enrolled. I also tell people that are doing their research, if you do have ancestors that were enslaved, to make sure that you look at the back of the card, because on the back of the card, it tells who their mother and father were and who their enslavers were as well. And here is a short little interview from Richard, stating how old he was, who he belonged to, his wife's name, and who she belonged to. And as you can see, it shows that, it shows that they were enrolled.
Yeah, we waiting for those right there.
So I just wanted to make it known that I didn't make this photo because I had just posted it on Twitter and it went viral and people were very upset. I do want people to know that I didn't make the photo. This photo has been circling around to the left for many years before I even started doing my own genealogy. So this is where I got the photo from. There's a group of Native Americans that are pretty upset about the things that African Americans have been doing, trying to claim that they are the real natives or aboriginals. So this is where I actually got the photo from. And as you can see to the right is the woman Pretty Nose, who participated in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So that's who that woman is. The next thing I wanted to show, I was scrolling on Pinterest and I seen this photo saying that African Americans are indigenous to America and not Africa. And I just want to know, if that's the case, why are you guys using photos of Africans to prove your case? It's kind of disingenuous and dangerous. And again, it's dangerous to use photos of people that you don't know. This is a thread of me and my cousin Ian. Well, not the thread, but this is the guy, Michael Hampton. He had to use this photo. I'm not sure what his point was, but the information that he was given was incorrect, because these are me and Ian's ancestors. If you know anything about John Hope Franklin, this is his son, Buck Franklin. This is his father, Buck Franklin.
Yeah, let me say real quick, Sister Janai, we actually spoke about them when we were going at the Pretendians. My brother Logic
Thank
gave
God.
an excellent breakdown on. He was like Indians name, but go ahead. You know, we you know what I'm saying, because the way they tried to maneuver it in a certain type of way to make it seem like these are just some aboriginal people who have been on this land for thousands and thousands of years. Go ahead, sis.
Yeah, it's dangerous to use photos of people that you don't know, because these people, their ancestors are still alive today. I mean, their descendants, excuse me, are still alive today, like me and Ian.
Okay, wait, one more interruption, sis. One more. Did you see the one thread where the sister had she said it was a Cherokee woman, that she was older, and it come to find out that this was the image of someone's great grandmother.
Yes.
And they owned a pie company. You seen that one? Do you have that in your slides?
No, I don't. I just did a couple. I was
all right. Go ahead. All right, my bad. Go ahead, sis.
I apologize. I just wanted to, show us just a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of dangerous to use photos of people that you don't know, because their descendants are still alive today. So me and Ian, we had to check this dude real quick. This is another false claim that I see people say, that Black people founded the city of Los Angeles, and that is incorrect. As you can see, this is a portrait of the Bahamian migrants standing in front of their house. So I don't know what was their intent on trying to take this photo to make it seem like, Black people founded the city of Los Angeles, because that's incorrect. And that is it.
Indeed.
All right.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for the sister, if you don't mind, Nyhiem. I would like you to basically kind of like elaborate on one of the pictures, just for the clarity of the people watching, because here at BTP, we tie these people up and we don't give them any outs. Could you go into just a little bit more detail about how they used those pictures of Africans and told people they were like Native Americans?
Yeah, I really don't know what's the intent by it. But I've seen it, go on for a couple of years where, people take pictures and lie about the information, and, they kind of don't even do the research on what's going on. So it's pretty dangerous out here, especially to those that are actually studying and can identify who these people are today.
Right. So, and I want to ask the brother too, as well. A question for you, brother, man. Well, I'll ask this question first, because we know this is probably going to come. Are you all ashamed of your Black heritage, or the Black heritage that you have coming from Africa as well?
Not at all. I'm very proud of it, and I think that's where a lot of my anger and my wanting to correct a lot of the misinformation out there comes from, is because our ancestors struggled and dealt with hardships in their life because of the fact they were of African descent, and we're very proud of that fact. And we're also Native, and it never had to be something that couldn't exist without the other. For them, that was not their reality. Like, they knew who they were, and I think it's very disrespectful, because people like Buck Colbert Franklin, who was in that photo, his father fought in the Indian Home Guard in Indian Territory during the Civil War to end slavery in Indian Territory. And as you said, we are cousins. Indian freedmen from Indian Territory are our own ethnic group. We weren't freed by the Emancipation Proclamation or the 14th Amendment, because Indian Territory was not a part of the United States of America. And so a full year after slavery had ended in the United States, me and Janai's ancestors were still enslaved in the Chickasaw Nation. Slavery in the Chickasaw Nation and Indian Territory didn't end until 1866, because that's when the United States government and the tribes signed treaties to end slavery in the territory, because it was not part of the U.S. So we literally are from two different nations and very related. For generations, freedmen have been marrying Black folks from the United States when Oklahoma became a state and we became citizens of this country. But from 1866 until Oklahoma became a state in 1907, our ancestors weren't citizens of the United States of America. And for Chickasaw freedmen, we were the only freedmen who were not adopted by the nation that we had lived in. And so from 1866 until Oklahoma became a state in 1907, we were stateless. We weren't citizens of
Wow.
anywhere in the world. And that's a
Wow.
history that only we as a people have. And there's been so much misinformation and so much erasure of Native history and of Black history to the point where they're trying to even stop it from being taught in schools. That there are so many Chickasaw Freedmen people from Oklahoma who don't even know their family's history like that, who don't even know that for 40 years their ancestors only had themselves, only had their relatives at their back because they weren't citizens of anywhere in this country, and they knew that they only could depend on their communities. And that's
So
what it boils down to at the end of the day. It's not about
Mhm.
the percentage of Indian DNA you have. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if that test says you're 50% Native or if you're 5% Native, because Native American is a generic term, just like the term Indian is a generic term. They don't
Yes.
mean anything unless you have a community and a tribe you belong to. So if a test says you're 20% Native, great. There are 495 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and that DNA could be from any one of them. So that is not a culture. That's not a language. That's not an identity. So you can't just claim to be Indian because this DNA test says this or that. It's about a community you come from. And all freedmen in Indian Territory have communities that we came from and that still exist because there are 13 all Black towns in Oklahoma that came from us being segregated when Oklahoma became a state. And that was the first law that passed when Oklahoma became a state. So it didn't matter if your family had been citizens of the Creek Nation and you've been a citizen of the Creek Nation before Oklahoma statehood, because to destroy the tribes, they purposely made all non-Black Native people, according to the racial laws of Oklahoma, white, and all Black Native people, whether your ancestors were on the by blood roll, which did happen, or if your ancestors were on the freedman roll, you became Black. No different from Black folks from the United States. And that's why our communities came together and built Oklahoma's all Black towns and were able to build Greenwood. And Buck Colbert Franklin, who people who are spreading misinformation always use, he was a lawyer who survived the massacre in Greenwood and sued the city of Tulsa afterwards so that the residents could rebuild their homes, and there's a park named after him. And so for people to be using our history to make these false claims is really dangerous. And it doesn't have anything to do with African history. It has nothing to do with Native history. It's not history, period.
So basically, let me get this. So you all are saying that you were actually stateless for a particular period of time?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah.
Wow.
the Chickasaw Freedmen have been called like a people without a country because we were citizenshipless for 40 years. From the signing of the
Wow.
treaty in 1866 until Oklahoma became a state in 1907, we didn't have citizenship in the United States or in the Chickasaw Nation. Because the Chickasaw Nation, unlike a lot of the other tribes, was a lot smaller and owned a much larger percentage of people of African descent. And
Right.
by the time that Oklahoma became a state, 46% of the Chickasaw Nation was made up of people of African descent. And so if they
Right.
enfranchised the freedmen as tribal citizens, we would have had equal voting power. And that's why the Chickasaw Freedmen were never adopted by
Right.
treaty like the other freedmen were. But the other freedmen were adopted by their tribes and did become citizens of those tribes. The first Black person to serve in a Supreme Court on this land was not in the United States. It was in the Creek Nation. Jesse Franklin was a Creek freedman who served on the Supreme Court of the Creek Nation. And so before Oklahoma became a state, there were Creek freedmen who were going to Congress protesting statehood and protesting the division of land into allotments, because that was something a lot of freedmen were against, because we understood that would pave the way for Indian Territory becoming a part of the United States, and many of our people were opposed to that.
I have something I want to add real quick about the statelessness of the Chickasaw people between the point of emancipation and, I'm assuming, the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act. Is that when um, the Chickasaw became American citizens?
No. So the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act was more for Native people who weren't in the Indian Territory, because when Oklahoma became a state, the Native people living in Oklahoma, for the most part, unless they were full bloods and a small minority, became citizens of the United States.
Okay,
So whether you were enrolled as a citizen of that nation as a freedman or a by blood member, you then became a citizen of the United States. And so
got you.
that's what many of the nations were against. And before Oklahoma became a state and before land allotment, no one person in any of our nations held land. So you could have personal property, you could own a house, but you couldn't have private property. When you died, and no one in your family took care of that land would then revert to the whole nation. And so before Oklahoma became a state and before allotment, even though Chickasaw Freedmen were citizenshipless, we were ranching on hundreds of acres of land that was like mostly free range because our ancestors lived in commonly held communities. That's what made our community so strong, is that no one person owned the land. We all owned land in common together throughout all of the tribes.
Now
So
let me
when
just
Oklahoma became a
add
state,
this real quick
yes.
about the 14th Amendment, like, because this is something that I was thinking about for a while, and I posit this in terms of the statelessness and why I think that the Chickasaw, at the very least, would have a claim against the United States for not protecting them, because the 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and not subject to the jurisdiction, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States. Now, here's the thing: the Chickasaw people, a lot of them were born in the United States, or the territory was known as the United States, and should have rightfully been covered, because if they didn't have allegiance to the Chickasaw Nation and the Chickasaw Nation had no allegiance to them, they should have had birthright citizenship underneath the 14th Amendment, just like any other natural born person. That's just my opinion about it, my observation in terms of what the United States should have done in order to protect these people, so that they're not stateless but honor the principle of just soli, just sanguinis, as they were natural born natives of this land, just like any other white person. I just wanted to add that into the mix. But go ahead in, brother.
Well, I think in 1866, when the United States drafted the treaty to free our ancestors from slavery, they set conditions for the Chickasaw Nation and the Choctaw Nation, because their treaties were a joint treaty. And in the treaty, it said that if the Chickasaw Nation decided not to adopt their freedmen within 2 years, the United States government would remove all of the Chickasaw freedmen living within the Chickasaw Nation into a different part of Indian Territory. So we still wouldn't have been necessarily under the jurisdiction of the United States, because we still would have been in Indian Territory, but we would have had our own land. But like a lot of the treaties the United States signed with tribes, they didn't honor them. And so they never, the Chickasaw Nation never adopted us, and the United States also never removed us. And after a period of time, we were not going to go anywhere, because we had made improvements on land, like raised our families on land. Our ancestors were buried in the Chickasaw Nation, so we weren't going anywhere. And people, I think, too, kind of don't understand like the time period that these things happened in, because between Oklahoma statehood, the Civil War, and the Trail of Tears, there are people alive who lived through all three of those things. The Trail of Tears for the Chickasaw Nation happened in the mid to late 1840s. That was 20 years later. The Civil War was happening in the 1860s that the Chickasaw Nation was a part of. They fought for the Confederacy. And then in 1907, Oklahoma became a state. So we have ancestors who lived through the Trail of Tears, who lived through the Civil War, and who lived through Oklahoma becoming a state. And so when people are making claims about our ancestors as if they have a right to say what our history is and isn't, it's extremely disrespectful to those people who survived like multiple genocides. And then on top of that, like in 1921, people who survived the Civil War and Oklahoma statehood survived the massacre in Greenwood too, because that happened in the Creek Nation and the Cherokee Nation, because Tulsa is split between those two nations.
I have a question. All right, you wanted to say something, Ali? For Sister Janai, the slavery element, right? Do you say that your ancestors were always here on this land, or do you say that your ancestors were enslaved by the Chickasaw tribe?
I don't say that my ancestors were always here, because that's just simply not true. They were enslaved. We do have like family history saying which parts come from where. Like there's a book concerning the Hooks lineage on my family, and it says that they come from Senegal. So I would never sit up here and say that they were indigenous to America.
Indeed.
And a lot of our ancestors, even though like the nation that they lived in, the nation that they were acculturated into was the Chickasaw Nation, right? So a lot of them, many of them spoke the Chickasaw language. A lot of our cousins still eat Chickasaw food. We name our we have nicknames for each other that are in Chickasaw, and we don't
Wait,
even
wait.
realize
I
the
have
name.
nicknames for the Pretendians, like Big Chief Buffalo Wings and Little
Oh, and
Chick.
the thing is about Top Cats too, he claimed to be related to me and
Get
Janai.
out of here.
He's
Right.
claimed to be
And,
related to the
and see,
Franklins.
that's what they
He
do.
related to
And,
everybody. Go ahead,
and
Grim.
you know, right, that's what they do. Like when they meet individuals like you all, so they won't be exposed. Because I mean, it was done to me years ago. And you know, when you expose someone, they'll say, "Oh, well, you know, you my cousin, by the way. You know, I bet people you know you was related to the Greens." You know, that's how that's the kind of stuff they do, so they won't be basically exposed for being pretendians. I just wanted to add that.
Indeed, indeed.
I
Yeah,
actually
so
have something I want to share real quick,
yeah,
just
brother.
to the point, because we're talking about um, where people came from, right? And a lot of it is no, you did not come from Africa, and no, you can't find any slave ships, and we black people, quote unquote, black people, as if that's a term that means something. Like brother said, Indian really doesn't mean anything, but I'm going to tell you, for those, black doesn't really mean anything either, right? Because anybody can be considered black. It's so funny. The Pretendians are the same people who will tell you that the early Americans were called black and Negro by Europeans. They keep talking about reclassification. They were called black. They were called Negroes. There's in Spanish, well, in the Spanish American colonies, they called them Negroes de Terra, right? Negroes of the land is what that means. They show you documentation. They talk about Walter Plecker very often. The man that did the work that he did in Virginia in the 1920s or 30s or whenever it was. So they're
They
consistently talking
reclassified
about reclassification as
us.
being Negroes and blacks and coloreds. But the interesting thing about it is they're admitting that anybody can be black, anybody can be Negro. So that in and of itself doesn't tell you anything. They're dark skinned people on the Indian subcontinent. There's some people in India who are darker than people in Africa. That doesn't mean that those are your people. You understand what I'm
You're
saying? It doesn't mean
100%
that
correct.
those are
You're
your
100%
progenitors.
correct. And
Go
if
on,
you
bro.
did DNA, there are people, Aboriginal people from Australia are referred to as black. They were racialized as black by white settlers from England. But those people have no African DNA the same way a white European has no African DNA. And I want to explain what I mean by that. Yes, they are of a darker skin color, but Aboriginal people's ancestors left Africa before white Europeans' ancestors left Africa. So in what I'm saying is that it's about color and racialization. That doesn't mean that your ancestors came out of Africa at a time that Black Americans' ancestors came out of Africa that formed our own unique culture from being a part of the African diaspora. Those are two separate things because Aboriginal culture is not in any, and there may be similarities to Aboriginal culture and African culture, but they are not closely related in the way that Indian culture is not closely related to African culture. In the same way that a lot of cultures aren't closely related to African culture because of the time that the people have been outside the continent of Africa.
Yes,
The way that DNA works is it picks up markers from the locations that your ancestors have lived in because we genetically adapt to our environment. So our ancestors lived in Africa for millennia. That's where people originate from. And so those markers are going to be there because of the time frame in which our ancestors left Africa. Aboriginal people's ancestors left Africa way before that. So those markers aren't there. Those markers are going to be there for the regions their ancestors lived in, which is going to be Melanesia, which is going to be Australia. So
absolutely.
if they took a DNA test, no African ancestry would come back.
Right.
And so when people are talking about skin color, is that denotes African ancestry? It is not the same thing. Black Americans are of African ancestry. And so to say that all people who are racialized as black are of African descent is false. It's incorrect and it's genetically also incorrect. It's
Come
scientifically
on,
not
brother.
sound.
I want
Come on.
to, Ali, before you go in real quick, let me address Lady Spade. Calling people pretendians is an insult when you don't know their lineage. We all have different lineages, right? So these this brother and this sister has got up here today, and they've proven their lineage. They've brought records. They didn't come up here and say, "I feel that I'm a Indian in my DNA." Somebody got some background noise.
Hold on, that's probably me.
That's
Let me mute. Yeah.
I'm gonna be quick. Your proof can't. No, matter of fact, he said to me, and this is Mel. He said, "I don't have to prove anything to you. I don't have to prove anything to anybody. I feel that I am an Indian," or whatever term he used, "because it's in my DNA." This is exactly what he said to me. So
Bro.
none of these, their brothers are not saying it. Their sisters, their cousins, their aunties, their uncles, their mothers, they never bring these people on. They never bring them on. Here, we have two cousins that just went through their genealogy. So if they are insulted by us calling them pretendians, they should be. They should be. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Ali.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is this, right? In terms of the African lineage of, you'll get people who use certain scholarship, right? Alexander von Wuthenow, for instance, and the terracottas in Mesoamerica. You'll get people who will talk about the findings of Van Sertima, which is based on the works of people like Leo Weiner, right? And others who came before him. And the interesting thing that I pointed out to someone, to a couple of them before, is that, because as they attempt to cut Africa out of the picture, every one of the European scholars that they're using who did any degree of rigor in these areas all imply that the dark-skinned people that they found were of some African origin, right? For instance, the Yamasee. This is why I pulled this up, because I wanted to read this, and I want people to understand what it is that's being done. The sources that many of them are using, generally these Europeans were implying that these people were of some kind of African ancestry. So look at this, from the United States Congressional Serial Set, issue 4340. This particular piece is talking about the Yamasee. Let me just read this. And they're talking about in the Beaufort, South Carolina area, this black population. The large Negro population on the coast of South Carolina is quite different from this here described. He's talking about different black populations. The mayor of Beaufort says the town is remarkable for quiet and good order. For 20 years past, not a single individual has been killed or seriously injured in any disturbance within the corporate limits. That is the statement of the mayor of Beaufort. And Beaufort is perhaps the blackest spot in the whole South. That is to say, the Negro population predominate there more there than anywhere else. There's a peculiar historical fact connected with that town that I would like to mention to the commission. That is the place where the federal troops first set the Negroes free. It was done on those islands in the neighborhood of Beaufort, and they are now there the predominant race, and this mayor refers to them as a quiet community. A most peculiar thing is this quatrophages. Now, y'all have to look up this man named Quatrophages, right? Look him up and look up the book that he wrote and look up what it is that he said about the quote-unquote Aboriginal Negroes that they found in the Americas as well, right? He also implies that they were of African origin. A most peculiar thing is this: Quatrophages in his book on the human race asserts the fact that the African lived on these islands long before the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. He is high authority, and he says that the Yamasee Indians were Negroes, what were known afterwards as the fiercest of the Indian tribes of the South. The well-known Yamasee Indians were Africans. Okay, so all of these scholars that these people are using. There is damn near no scholarship from any of these people who talk about dark-skinned aboriginals being found here. There's nothing that any of those scholars said that doesn't imply that they somehow came from Africa. I just wanted to make that clear because these people are consistently trying to cut the African lineage, the African ancestry out of the picture. Right?
Right.
I know that we have issues, diaspora wars going on right now. I know that the Nigerians pop shit. I know that the Ethiopians are popping shit. I know that the Somalians. I understand all of the stuff that's going on. There's a lot of stuff happening on social media with this diaspora war between Black Americans and people of the continent and people of the Caribbean. But at the same time, we can't ignore the actual history and the ancestry of the people just because we're having beef with some of the people in the continent in the Caribbean right now. Go in, fam. Go in, y'all.
Yeah, and I before the brother and sister comment, I just wanted to say, I want to say one thing. You know, I'm insulted too after listening to the brother actually do, break down the history, so eloquently. I'm basically, insulted for them because of all of the suffering going stateless and all of the suffering that their ancestors or whatnot went through for an African American, who have a whole different set of circumstances come in and actually usurp this sister's and this brother's history. I'm insulted for them. And I wanted to say something too about the illogical fallacy of pretendianism. And the logical, like Ali was breaking it down, like we always said, we don't doubt whether there was transcontinental travel of Africans here, Africans there, pre-Columbian. That's not our issue. But what really is our issue is like, how are you going to say that those aboriginals who may have come here eventually became the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Washita, the Yamasee, and so on, and so all of the different tribes who went along the Trail of Teals. So they doing all types of acrobatics to say that those groups or small groups that may have came here pre-Columbian actually became the tribes that you all are descended from. And it's just basically an illogical fallacy. But I'm going to turn it back over to the brother and sister if they want to expound upon a lot of this.
Yeah, unmute, sister Janai.
I want to read too. I feel like a lot of the times I've seen people talk about the Aboriginals or the American original Indians being Black, it always comes from either photos or like an account a white man who had just made contact for the first time with Native people made. And I just don't understand how people can put more faith and trust into the words of a white colonizer from the 17 and 1500s who had just met Native people before, had no idea where he even was geographically. And they take that as word. But when things come out of the mouths of people who survived the transatlantic slave trade, they don't want to take it as a fact. There's some wrong with your thinking there, because there are people who wrote books about the Middle Passage. There are people that wrote books about their lives in slavery. So to say that these things didn't happen when it's something
the slave narratives, bro, the slave narratives.
Yep. I'm about to read one of the slave narratives right now that
Yes.
comes out of Oklahoma. It's from Matthew Maytubby. He was a Choctaw Freedman, and this is what he said about his family and his life. If I can remember right, I was born March 3rd, 1889, in a little town in Indian Territory named Oberlin. My father and grandfather were both born there or near there. My mother was born in North Carolina, and my grandmother was a native of Africa. One of the very first things that I can remember was a little old lady sitting in the chimney corner and sometimes being very, very sad, even crying when she would tell us about her childhood home. She was over 100 years old, my mother said. I cannot remember how they got them into a ship, but my great-grandmother and 3 girls and 1 boy were brought over in a ship to the southern coast of Texas and sold as slaves, an Indian getting my grandmother when she was quite a young girl. And so these were people, this man's father was Choctaw and not Black or of African descent. And his mother was Black and his grandmother was a native of the continent of Africa. And this is something that's documented. So when people spit these conspiracy theories, they go directly against the words that came out of people who lived these historical events' mouth. So they'll never, ever be equal. And there's really no argument to be had.
Indeed. Sister Janai.
That's pretty much all that I had to say. I'm happy that, I was able to show my documentation. I did see someone in the comments saying something about paying to be a $5 Indian, and I'm not sure if they missed the presentation of the PowerPoint, but I do want you to do your research so that you can see that all people were trying to pay or trying to get on the rolls to receive land. So it just wasn't white people. It was African Americans as well.
Indeed.
And to be honest with you, that makes right. It makes logical sense that people would attempt to take advantage
They wanted
of
land and didn't have anything.
of. That's right. Come on. Go ahead.
And there's something a
Go
lot
ahead,
of people
Lord.
don't understand about our communities, is like the amount of land that Black folks in Indian Territory held the time Oklahoma became a state. Like, I don't think there is any larger group of Black landowners in the United States than in Indian Territory, because in the nations, when the Dawes allotment happened, every individual citizen of these nations were given their own allotments of land. So man, woman, and child, if you had 10 kids and you were enrolled as a by-blood citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, you would receive anywhere from, I think it was 160 to 280 acres. And that wasn't for a family, that was per person. So if your wife was Chickasaw, she was getting her land, and all of your children were getting land as well. And so there were freedmen families that had 10 kids, and in the Creek Nation, Creek freedmen received 160 acres of land. So at the time that Oklahoma became a state, Creek freedmen, as an ethnic group, held 1 million acres of land. And Sarah Rector, who people talk a lot about, was a Creek freedman, and her wealth came from oil being discovered on her land allotment. And so a part of the reason why there are still so many all Black towns in Oklahoma, a part of the reason why Greenwood was the most successful Black community in America at the time, was because of the land allotments that freedmen have that we were able to leverage for the betterment of our own communities that Black folks from the United States of America also lived in when Oklahoma became a state. And a lot of freedmen lost their land allotments because they were stolen from them, because there was no protection, because we were not given a blood quantum. So we were enrolled as freedmen, and because we were not given a blood quantum, the United States government didn't see fit to protect our land allotments. And so a lot of white grafters came in and were able to steal our land allotments, and not everyone spoke English. And my cousin, Buck Colbert Franklin, was a lawyer who helped people fight for their land allotments. And he did a lot of land allotment advocacy work in Oklahoma and Indian Territory. But yeah, the Franklins, the part of Oklahoma our family is from, me and Janae can go down there and we would find cousins in a minute. We could get a plate to eat. Like, there's so many places we could go.
Somewhere to sleep.
And that's what it's about. It's not about
there's a
the
specific
or some description that a white man from the 1700s gave about Native Americans, and you trying to compare your grandma to that color. It's about the community you come from and our families come
right.
from.
And that brings
you,
me
brother.
to a question. I have a question real quick, Nyhiem. So,
go ahead. Can y'all hear me though?
Yes.
Okay, I thought my mic had went out. It had went out before we came on. Go ahead, Brother Grimm.
Yeah, just a quick question. So basically, you all didn't wake up one day living lives as African Americans and then said that you all were Indians. You all were actually raised basically living not only just in Chickasaw land, you all also were basically enculturated or whatever and experiencing a Choctaw lifestyle with, like you were saying, the Choctaw language and Choctaw cultural elements. Is that correct? Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm sorry. Ian did grow up in Indian Territory. I didn't. I grew up in California. Just me doing my own genealogy. I did discover that that's how my family was tied to Indian Territory.
Yeah, I grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up in Oklahoma City. I still grew up in the city. But like our family from the country, like they really grew up around our cousins, our communities, and even Black folks who don't live in all Black towns in the country still live in communities that are like 30 minutes away and still have land in those areas. Most of Oklahoma's Black landowners, Black farmers, Black ranchers are freedmen. Their families have held land in Oklahoma since before Oklahoma was a state. Before Oklahoma statehood, our ancestors, I interviewed one of our elders who is in her 90s, and she knew her father, who spoke Chickasaw, played stickball, which is the original version of lacrosse that Chickasaw and Choctaw people have been playing for thousands of years. They were a part of Chickasaw and Choctaw culture, whether they were citizens or not, and their communities were a part of those tribal communities. And Oklahoma, if you go to Google Maps right now and type in Oklahoma, the boundaries of those nations will pop up, because that is still, according to treaties made by the U.S. government and those tribes, Indian land, and their reservational boundaries will pop up on Google Maps. Like, that's native land, and our families have been living there for thousands of years. Our family, my family, Janai's family, were Franklins. The Franklins have been living in the Chickasaw Nation since the 1700s, since before the United States was even a country. We didn't start living in the United States of America until the 1900s.
So it's fair to say that you all, and even a sister, even though she grew up in California, she could find definite immediate relatives that were actually part of the Choctaw Nation, the Chickasaw Nation, and were actually living culturally as these people, amongst these, picking up, Chickasaw morals and values and culture and language. Would that be a fair assessment? Because I just want to make a point against the Pretendians. So would you all say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, Ian was just informing me, because we have another cousin named Myra that does genealogy, and she was showing some type of presentation showing that how long our ancestors have been in Indian territory, and Ian had told me it had been over 240 years, I believe. And my great grandmother's brothers, they're still alive. These old elders, they're still alive. They still talk about growing up in Tatum, in the all Black town, of how things used to be. So I encourage people to go to an all Black town. Go to Indian territory. It's nothing wrong with going to Indian territory and meeting people and asking people questions. They're pretty friendly.
So if you indulge me one more, Brother Nyhiem, because basically, I'm glad you all answered that, Brother Ian and Sister Janai. I really appreciate that, because basically what you have in Pretendianism is people who were living as American freedmen, i.e. people who were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, whose ancestors were owned by American citizens and plantation owners and politicians that belong to the quote unquote United States proper, who have absolutely no connection to what you all have connection to. And that's why I asked that question, because I wanted to make a point that these people are African Americans, or American freedmen rather, who woke up one day and say, hey, they read some Moorish literature and pamphlet or something and said that they were the original inhabitants of the land, discounting all of these people that were here thousands of years ago and usurping their history, basically culture vultures. So I'll land on my plane on this. How do you all feel about the actual Chickasaw, Choctaw, or whatnot people who actually owned your ancestors, and those people who basically fought for the Confederacy, those Indian tribes who fought for the Confederacy to basically keep y'all forefathers basically enslaved? Because Pretendians don't cover this, that the fact that those people were slave owners, no better than, or maybe a little bit better than the Europeans. I don't know. But could you all want to expound on that?
There's no good slavery. People make this point all the time and try to say that like, oh, Indian people culturally weren't white. That's very true for the most part. But there's no good slavery. There's no good form of enslavement. The way that slavery started in the Chickasaw Nation and in all of the southeastern tribes is through white people kind of making a bastardization of the traditional kinship ties of those nations. So traditionally, and I'm talking pre-contact, and a lot of the times, like century or two following, Chickasaws made contact with white folks in the 1500s. It was in 1549, I think, Hernan de Soto came into the Chickasaw and Choctaw Nation. And so that was over 400 years ago. But traditionally, being Chickasaw or being Choctaw was only determined on your mother because we were people of matrilineal descent. So what was more important than being Chickasaw or Choctaw was your clan, because that dictated your role in society and a bunch of other things. But your nation, what your tribal identity was based off of your mother. And that's very similar to a lot of African countries where your ethnic group is determined on your mother's ancestry. And so if your father was white, if your father was black, if your father was Creek, if your father was Cherokee, if your mother was Chickasaw, you were Chickasaw. That's where you got your clan from. That's where your main identity was. Your mother's brother was actually closer to you than your own father a lot of the times in Native nations. And so when Chickasaw people started coming to contact with white people, Chickasaw people, and this is for all of the southeastern tribes, I would say, people of higher status clans would marry white people, white traders, for influence and for to bring resources into their communities. But these white men were also trading cattle, stock, and another form of cattle and property was people of African descent. And so these white men would bring in people that they enslaved, or they would start plantations in these nations, and they would have Chickasaw wives. And so their children would go on to inherit their property, and their children wouldn't be seen as half white or half whatever because their mother was Chickasaw. There was no idea of being half of something. You either were or you weren't. And so their children went on to inherit their slaves. And so that's how it happened. Our family was owned by people who were related through generations in the nations. They were owned by members of the same family. And so that's how slavery got started in the Chickasaw Nation and all of the southeastern nations. And so there is no better form of slavery. There were slave narratives where a woman talked about how brutal one of her slave masters was, and how she knew a woman who couldn't get her slave master's baby to stop crying. And so he whipped her so badly she couldn't breastfeed her own children. So there's no better.
And this is an actual Chickasaw that did that?
Yes. And not all of them, but a lot of the people who were slave owners in the southeastern nations were mixed with white. They were part white and part native. And a lot of freedmen who are also native by blood, their ancestors were also white and native. I went to school with people whose family members own mine, like in high school, because Oklahoma is like small. And if you know people's last names from some of these families, you know who their ancestors were. So I went to school with people whose ancestors own my ancestors. And so when you ask me how I feel about Chickasaw and Choctaw people, we're not recognized as native by the federal government or by those nations because they disenrolled our ancestors. But they have no more claim over indigeneity or being native than we do. And also a part of that has to do with the fact that these are tribes of lineal descent. And that's a point I think a lot of people, especially a lot of folks who just aren't familiar with native communities and aren't familiar with Oklahoma, don't understand, because they'll meet people who are citizens of the Cherokee Nation, have a card, and are white, blonde hair, blue-eyed white. Their last full-blood ancestor was alive when George Washington was president. But their ancestors from that point on, even though they continued to marry white people, those white people were immigrating into the Cherokee Nation because it was a sovereign nation and marrying people in those nations. So even though they were marrying white people, they still were citizens of that nation. Went on the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma, and their white descendants are still enrolled. There are people who are 1/1000th Cherokee that are enrolled in those nations because all it takes is having an ancestor who was a citizen of those tribes at the time that Oklahoma became a state. Wow. But if you are a freedman or a person of African descent in those nations whose ancestors are on the freedman roll, if your ancestors were citizens of those tribes at the time that Oklahoma became a state, you cannot enroll in those tribes because of the enrollment standards that those tribes have kept. So we're discriminated against by Chickasaw and Choctaw people, but they have no more right over our identity, to Chickasaw identity, to Choctaw identity, than we do. The Chickasaw Nation uses ethnographic work that was done or recorded from the knowledge of Chickasaw freedmen. When you look at the history, there's so much knowledge our ancestors had about being Chickasaw. Even their slave masters, in one of the narratives, this woman was asking her slaves what her dream meant. Like, we were a part of that community, regardless of how messy and the ways that happened. Throughout statehood. So even being enrolled or not being enrolled, it doesn't mean that we're not a part of Indian territory, and doesn't mean our history isn't our history. So that's not something they can take from us. And a lot of them are white and are very racist. I've got cousins on Ancestry who are Trump supporters and are citizens of the Choctaw Nation, and his wife works for the Choctaw Nation. And they're both Trump supporters. And they can enroll as citizens of those nations because their ancestors were white and Native, and my ancestors were Black and Native and were put on the freedmen roll. But do I think that those people have more of a right to Choctaw identity than I do? No, not at all.
Indeed. Did you all see? We have a question coming from Dean Smith. I'm gonna try to get to some of the questions in the chat. Dean Smith asked, did y'all see the Skip Gates and Don Cheadle lineage video?
Yeah, I saw the Henry Louis Gates Jr. and Don Cheadle video. Don Cheadle is a Chickasaw freedman. Cheadle is a Chickasaw. It's an English last name, but if you're from Oklahoma, the Cheadle last name is a Chickasaw name. And people that are Black that have it are Chickasaw freedmen. My lunch lady at school was a Cheadle when I was in high school. And so like Oklahoma is that small that like I went to school with my lunch lady at school was one of Don Cheadle's relatives.
Wow.
And Don Cheadle's ancestor was a Kemp who fought in the Civil War to end slavery in Indian Territory, just like me and Janai's relative, Buckover Franklin, or not Buckover Franklin, his father, David Franklin, did in the Indian Home Guard. So, I mean, our history is well documented. Even if some of the descendants of these people don't know it, you go back to your great-grandparents, you just have to get back to 1907, and you immediately have access to that because our ancestors did not live in the United States, and all of our ancestors received land allotments. And so there's a documented history there. And not only does it tell you who your ancestors were, it tells you who their parents were and who their parents were enslaved to. And so we're able to piece together so much of our genealogy from these records that Oklahoma statehood has been taken from us because our families all lived in the country. And then with the Dust Bowl, with the Great Depression, all these things that happened when Oklahoma became a state and segregation, we ended up moving to cities. That's why Janai's family ended up
this basically answers
ended up in Oklahoma City.
Look, EYB Entertainment, this basically answers the question that you have up on the screen where you say, I think it's more complicated. What about freedmen who fled to the south, to the north, but have a claim to tribal inheritance? I mean, they still have that claim.
I don't know what freedmen he's talking about, because if their ancestors were citizens of if their ancestors were free from slavery in the United States, they became U.S. citizens at the time the slavery ended. And so even if they came to Indian Territory, they wouldn't have been able to enroll as Choctaw freedmen or Chickasaw freedmen because their ancestors weren't Choctaw freedmen. They were enslaved to Choctaw people. At the time the slavery ended in the United States, they had been enslaved to white Americans. And even let's say that they were enslaved to, there were some people who were like lighter skinned, who had a majority white ancestry, who may have a little Native blood. Their great grandmother may have been Native. And they stayed in the South after the Trail of Tears, and they ended up owning slaves. You wouldn't be considered a freedman because that person, even if they may have had a little bit of Native ancestry, was an American citizen. They weren't citizens of that tribe. They gave up their tribal citizenship when the tribe left that area and were moved to Oklahoma and became citizens of the United States. So you can't really say that those people are freedmen because freedmen are from Indian Territory, period.
Okay. So, Brother Ali, did you have anything to say to that?
Come on, brother. Teaching, Ian up here teaching, man. Come on. Yeah, nah. I'm just glad on this because I love it when we talk to people who actually know, who are educated in the particular areas that they're speaking on. Obviously, Brother Ian, Sister Janai. Did I say that right, Janai? Is it Janai? It's Janai, right? Come on, I got it. Our family are educated, and I'm into exalting our family. That's the type of person I am, and I think we should continue these kinds of conversations and these connections, and just keep these things going. I'm enlightening the people. Peace.
And I have to say too, there are some freedmen who almost none of their ancestors were enslaved by white people in the United States from the time that their ancestors came to this country. But a lot of us are also American freedmen because Oklahoma's been a state for 114 years now. I remember when I'm a kind of a youngin', I'm 25.
That's powerful.
But, when I was in the 4th grade, Oklahoma turned 100. So it's not that old of a state. And a lot of us have ancestry from the United States. My mom's side of the family are from Mobile, Alabama. And the same time that they were being removed because they were owned by white Congress people in South Carolina, and they were some of the first settlers of the territory of Alabama. And so as my mom's side of the family was being removed to the southeast by white people to be enslaved there, my dad's side of the family was being removed to Oklahoma from Mississippi because they were being removed with the tribe during the Trail of Tears. And so I think that it's really important for Black folks to know our roots and to know where we come from. Like, I really feel like Black American history lives in the Southeast, and that's where all Chickasaw, Choctaw, all freedmen of Southeastern tribes are from, because the Southeast is native land. That's where all the 5 tribes are from. And so we wouldn't have the Black Belt of the United States where most Black folks in this country still live had it not been for the Trail of Tears, because a big motivation for removing Native people from their land was so that slavery could increase, because the original borders of the United States were the 13 original colonies. And as westward expansion happened with U.S. independence came the increase of slavery. And so they immediately had to remove all of those tribes in the Southeast to expand cotton agriculture, because cotton takes up so much land. They had to constantly be expanding the land that they were taking to grow cotton and to grow all of these things that they were using for the enslavement of people of African descent. And so they removed my ancestors in the Chickasaw Nation, the Choctaw Nation, and all of the people, Indian people of the Southeast, and the people of African descent who were living in those nations, to Oklahoma, so that there could be the population of Black folks in the United States in the Southeast that there is now. And so our histories are very much interconnected, and we have a lot in common. I would say most freedmen are also African American, but not all African Americans are freedmen. This is because we come from such a small group of people. And a lot of Black folks from the United States have married into our families. But if you don't come from that part of Oklahoma, you're probably not a freedman.
All right.
Like,
let me
powerful.
I mean, a freedman from Indian territory.
But I want to say, right, when this is how we see the freedman connection, right? So we were slaves to white folks in the South who were American citizens. In fact, we were American citizens with disabilities, according to several congressional debates that we've pulled up on this platform on several different occasions. And I want your response to this, Brother Ian. Brother Logic is about to jump on in a few minutes as well. And the treaties that were made with the 5 slaveholding tribes in 1866, because according to the historical records, the 5 slaveholding tribes did not free the slaves their slaves until 1866. And it was due to negotiations that was had between the United States of America and those Indian nations. And this created the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cherokee, Muskogee, and Seminole freedmen. So when we're saying American freedmen, that's what we mean by it. When we say freedmen in general, we'll use the term United States freedmen, right? Because the United States is the geographical location. American is the demonym of America, right? So it's just like you would say, I don't know if this is a thing, but I'm just going to make it up, Chickasawian, right? For a Chickasaw, a native or citizen in that particular nation. American is the demonym. So when we say American freedmen, that's what we mean. When we're referencing our family who are of those 5 tribes, we just call them Chickasaw Freedmen, Choctaw Freedmen, Cherokee freedmen, etc. Broadly, we use the term United States freedmen. So, you know, a brother Logic.
No, we use the term American freedmen. I
excuse
think you misspoke.
No. When we're talking about all freedmen, we'll say United States freedmen. When we're talking about, when we're talking about us specifically, who were freed via the Emancipation Proclamation and then the 13th Amendment in 1865, then we say American freedmen. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Logic.
Yo, yeah, that piece to the guest, man, I've been listening on. I wish I could have came on from the outstart. Excellent. I appreciate y'all coming out and having this discussion. Our organization is called the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. Our goal is to unite the sons and daughters, lost sons and daughters of freedmen, bring us together. And like Nyhiem was saying, well, when we say American freedmen, we're talking about those freedmen who have American nationality. That's the denonym he was talking about. So the American freedmen connected into the legislative process after the end of the Civil War, which transformed those or transcended those former slaves who held the status. Because in the United States of America, freedmen is a political status, is what's specific about the situation in America after the Civil War. Slavery is a status. To be a slave is a status, right? And so after the Civil War was won and ended, the slaves received a new status called freedmen. Congressional commitments was made to the freedmen in 1865, right? And then government promises, programs. You had Joseph Rainey from South Carolina was the chairman of the Congressional Committee on Freedmen Affairs, and so that's where you get the Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands. And so when the government establishing jurisdiction and territory of the bringing an entire end to the slave situation in the United States and its territories, the treaties were made, and then the freedom status was born again in 1866 with those nations that made treaties with the United States government, right? And so the freedman status has historically been connected to those who were once held in private bondage as slaves and held the slave status, and then were liberated through different acts. Some were purchased their own freedom, some were joined in the Revolutionary War, enlisted in the George Washington Enlistment Act, and became freedmen that way. Some individuals became freedmen through state abolition, abolishing slavery on a state level. But the federal classification and granting of the status of freedmen, because it's a reason why, let me finish that, came with, one, the executive order from President Lincoln, but we all know executive orders do not have a full weight and power of law. It's an executive will, and it's an extension of executive authority, but to make it law, the Congressional Act had to be done. So the 13th Amendment had to come and abolish slavery in America, and that created the freedman status for the citizens of the United States of America. And another thing that we also teach is, and we've written, Ali has written papers with Dr. Darity on this matter that I'm about to mention, and we've done several programs throughout the years about it, that the slaves held in private bondage by citizens of the United States of America were also citizens. They were handicapped from accessing the rights and privileges of citizens and exercising the responsibility and duties of citizens, but because they had no foreign or former allegiance to anyone, they held the citizenship status. And so being a slave to citizens of America, once we were liberated, the freedman status had to be made, because now we needed to be a special group within this government that needed certain things, because that status of slave came with a history of treatment. And so to protect us from that treatment, you had to have a protected class. And so anyone who was a former slave got the status of freedman. And then what came along with that was the 1866 Civil Rights Act, right? That's at the same time the treaties were being made with the Indian governments and the Indian nations, the different Indian nations, right? Creating this freedman status as well. Within their nations, they can do government to government relations in America. And so the protected class, the freedmen always were supposed to be a protected class, whether they were Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Creek, or the American freedmen. It was meant to be a protected group because of the generations that we have been divested of our rights and liberties as citizens and members of government. And so once that happened, you get, like I said, the 1866 Civil Rights Act, the 1866 treaties, and then you get the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed equal protection under the law. And then you get the 15th Amendment, which was supposed to protect and bring about the enfranchisement of the freedmen throughout the South. And so when we understand the power of the freedmen, there's so many, like the freedmen moved this country forward in ways that it had never been moved before. In fact, our brother Graham, we look at Reconstruction, and he calls it quite eloquently the second founding of America. That second founding comes through is combined with the creation, the largest creation of freed people from bondage in history. When you think about the 2 years, 1865 and 1866, and the amount of the 4 million American freedmen, combined with all of the freedmen from the Indian nations, those are the two greatest years of liberation in history. And so we are the united sons and daughters of freedmen, whether you come from, because we all connected. So whether you come from the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, so on and so forth, or you come from one of the states who held you united by, we are all freedmen at the end of the day, and we're supposed to be working together to get what's rightfully ours. We got things that they owe us, right? There's things that they owe us because of the how do we know that they owe us? Because it's legislated in law through the congressional commitments. Y'all have things that they owe you. How do you know that? Because it's in law, treaty rights and agreements with the government, promising certain things to certain groups of people known as freedmen. And so we all, if we do the history, we know exactly who is who and what is owed to who. And if we work together, we have a better chance at getting what is rightfully ours, our birthright inheritance. And you know, I'm gonna stop right there. And I just was so fired up from listening. I wasn't able to join, and I just wanted to thank you two again for coming on to the program. Y'all have exercised such brilliant knowledge over the subject and the history. I really appreciate you two. And so I'm gonna pass the mic back to Nyhiem.
Yes, indeed.
Hey,
Indeed. Our brother.
I want to get lighthearted, a little bit lighthearted real quick, man. Sister Janai.
Yes.
Yeah, you are a beautiful black Indian sister. Jesus Christ, man.
That's right. That's right.
Y'all remember, y'all probably too young to remember. Y'all remember that movie Posse with Mario Van Peebles?
Oh yeah, I remember.
He had the Indian freedman sister.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you look like, sister. I just want to let you know you're a beautiful black Indian sister. Jeez.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Indeed, indeed.
Just wanted to get a little lighthearted, y'all. That's all.
Oh no, definitely, man. Logic, you was coming in a little bit choppy, but I think the family got the gist of what you were saying up on the panel. Brother Ian, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that or say to anything that Brother Logic was speaking to?
I would say that people, when it comes to like the term freedman, not everyone in our community like agrees with the term. Like some people just they're Chickasaw Freedmen, but they see themselves as Chickasaw because they see freedmen as a part of the Chickasaw Nation. But I would say that like people associate the term freedmen with slavery a lot, and I think that there is definitely they're related, but that's not like they're not correlated. Like they're similar, like they're along the same lines, like they have stuff to do together, but they're not synonymous, because the Seminole Freedmen actually were the first freedmen, because they fought in the Seminole Wars, which were also known as the Gullah Wars, because the amount of people from the Low Country who were escaping into Florida to join the ranks of the Seminoles and of the villages that Seminole Freedmen had in Florida. And so when they were removed to Oklahoma, they fought for their independence, and there was a proclamation called Jessup's Proclamation that freed all Seminole freedmen. And so when the Seminole Nation signed a peace treaty with the United States government to remove to Oklahoma, all of the people who had been fighting in that war became freed. And this was in the 1840s, was around the time of Indian removal. They became freed and were living in Indian territory as free people. And so the Seminole Freedmen are the smallest of all of the freedmen in Indian territory, but they're also like really up there, because like all that they did fighting to end slavery in the Southeast, it was like one of the biggest threats to the United States government, and that's where their peace came from. And a lot of them, because the United States government tried to put the Seminole Nation, the Creek Nation, and Creek people practice slavery, they tried to re-enslave Seminole freedmen. And a lot of them went to Texas and Mexico and became known as the Muskogos, and that's why they were still one of the smallest freedmen groups in Oklahoma. And so you've got like all of these different parts of Oklahoma.
But let me just ask real quick. Well, the year you said that Seminoles were the first freedmen, correct? Like the Seminole freedmen.
Jessup's Proclamation was in. I don't necessarily think they're the first freedmen per se, but the Seminole freedmen among the freedmen of Indian Territory were the first people known as freedmen, and this was even before. Well, this was at the time of removal, is what I'm trying to say.
So do you know what year that was about?
That was in 1836.
1836. Okay, well, I just wanted to say, if you do some research into New York.
No, I'm sorry. It was in 1836 that it became the policy became asserted that by war the slave may emancipate himself. It may be necessary for the master to recognize his emancipation by treaty of peace. And this was in 1836 by John Quincy Adams, because of the amount of damage that the Seminole and freed Africans who lived with them were doing to sugar plantations in Florida. One of my good friends is related to Chief John Horse. Not Chief John Horse. I'm Caesar Bruner. No, she's related to John Horse. I think she's related to John Horse, and he was a Seminole warrior. No, she's related to Abraham. Abraham was a Seminole warrior.
Familiar with Abraham.
Yeah, she's a descendant of Abraham, and like she knows her family history, and her grandmother was on council for the Seminole Nation in Oklahoma. And Abraham like went on several campaigns where they burnt up all those sugar plantations in northern Florida. And so that the Jessup's Proclamation, they were the first group of Indian freedmen to become free, and that was even before removal. And so people will say that freedmen has to do with slavery and Indian territory, and like they're related, but that doesn't mean like that they are define each other, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, definitely. So I mean, family, we had I kind of want to contrast.
Let me say.
Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing, because you know what, a lot of people say that to us too, right? And then when we kind of brought the American freedmen history and understanding back to the group in the space that we occupy, it kind of was received with that same kind of sentiment by a lot of people. Say, you know what, it kind of reminds me of slavery. I think it like is tied into slavery. But when that's why we educate, right? If you really understand that the freedman status in the largest sense was born out of warfare. So it should be, if you really know the history, it's directly connected to liberation. So freedmen should be more synonymous with freedom and liberty than it should slavery. See, because when you think about the freedman, how did you become a freedman? You had to break the chains of private bondage first. So it should be embraced as a liberating term. People should be proud. Those early freedmen was proud to be called freedmen. They didn't want to be slaves no more. They was proud to be freedmen. The Europeans who were around in that same time dreaded to hear the word freedman. They dreaded to hear about the freedmen doing this or doing that or going here and going there. The freedman is a powerful status, and it is a liberating term, not only because of just breaking the private bonds of chains. All of the legislation connected to the freedmen was arresting the development of oppression. If you look at what freedmen legislation did, it arrested the powers of oppression. What was it doing? It stopped you from owning slaves. It made the freedmen, it made laws protecting the former slaves. It made laws that you had to do contract and business with freedmen, right? And so when you see what's going on in early Reconstruction, not only with just the American freedmen, but also the native tribes, freedmen groups as well. And you look at the legislation, the policies, the programs, and the projects, and what the governments were doing for the freedmen, it should never make you feel like, well, damn, I'm a slave, or it makes me feel like a slave if I call myself. No, the reason why you're here today is because somebody was a freedman. You understand? The reason why you're doing what you're doing today because somebody was a freedman. We stopped being slaves. We stopped being held in private bondage, and even though we had to fight through public subjugation after the overthrowing of Reconstruction, we fought again. But if it wasn't for freedmen, you would have no civil rights in this country. If it wasn't for freedmen, you would not have the immigrants being able to come here and have babies and automatically get citizenship. Because the 14th Amendment was for the freedmen, saying that they were born here, that they are citizens, right? And so I can go on and on, but I know y'all have been teaching for a while. But you fired me back up because we had a conversation about a week or so ago where somebody said that in one of our educational programs. It's like, that makes me sound feel like a slave when I say, no, it should make you feel like a freed person, a freedom fighter. Freedman is synonymous with liberation. And I just wanted to say that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I so appreciate y'all. I don't know how much time y'all had, but we been on here
You breaking
close
up, Ali.
to 2 hours, right? Since we've gone live. Is there anything else coming?
You breaking up, Ali. I don't know if he can hear me. But I wanted to do something before y'all got off. Because y'all came on here and dropped it tonight. Absolutely went in. We learned a whole lot. I can't wait to actually go back tomorrow and listen to the matter of fact, I might actually go back and listen to it tonight. It just all depends. But I want to, if y'all would indulge me for a moment. I know we've been sitting here for a minute. I want to play something real quick. I want to show the difference between what people who are genuine teach and what those people who are disingenuous teach. Now, this is for the audience and this is for our guests as well. Just give us a second. All right, this is a conversation we're having with legendary Chief Top Cap. I'm not gonna play this whole thing. I'm gonna just play a few seconds of it basically, and then we're gonna comment on it and we're gonna close this thing out. Pay attention,
when the Spanish
family.
guy here, these are the people that they came across.
Wait, let me pause this. Notice,
stop it right there. Go ahead.
So, notice, and I want you all to look at everything that's going on here. I'm gonna let it play out, but I want you to see what he has up on the screen. Jacksonville Historical Society. I'm guessing that he pronounces it as Tamiqua, so I'm going to pronounce it as Tamiqua.
No,
I don't know. I don't think that it is. It looked like
it's Tamuqua.
Tamuqua, but he's calling it the Tamiqua because that's how you would say it if you was like from Texas somewhere or America. Right? That's exactly how you would say it.
You would think an indigenous person know how to speak the tongue, right? You've been here since forever. You indigenous, right?
Notice it says native appearances on this top line right here in the second column. Native from his Jacksonville Historical Society. So let's let this play.
These are the Tamiqua people, all right? These Tamiqua people, they're what you call a Muskogee stock down south. This is the Mississippi Mound Builders. And
this is legendary Chief Top Cap. Y'all listening to, family. Watch this. Just give us a few minutes.
I mean, so if y'all
which Europeans are you talking about though?
Wait a minute. Let me go back. Hold on.
Yeah, because he said, yeah. Anyway,
we missed something. That we are the true indigenous Americans. Like, I mean, come on. I had to address that. All right, what do you have up on the screen? Let's take a look.
All right, when the Spanish got here, these are the people that they came across. These are the Tamiqua people. All right, this Tamiqua people, they're what you call a Muskogee stock down south. This is the Mississippi Mound Builders.
So this was all cap, y'all. So I just want to play this one part real quick, because this dude was just on here lying, family. He said that the Spaniards that came here seen that these people were this is how they depicted themselves with that statue that we see right there. But we knew that this was an absolute lie. So one of the things that we did was they depicted themselves. This is how they looked. You heard it the first time, then you heard him say it again with confidence. So let's read something real quick. This is called the Green Vault. It is a museum located in Dresden, Germany, which contains the largest treasure collection in Europe. The museum was founded in 1723 by Augustus the Strong of Poland and Saxony, and it features a variety of exhibits and styles from Baroque to Classicism. The Green Vault is named after the formerly malachite green painted columns based on the capitals of the initial rooms. It has, it has some claim to be the oldest museum in the world. It is older than the British Museum, opened at 1759. So on this same page of the Green Vault, it highlights one of the main pieces in its museum. Voila, the Moor with emerald cluster. So this guy says that the image that we see was a Tamiqua Indian, and that this is how the Tamiqua, using his pronunciation, depicted themselves. But this is a Moor with emerald clusters in the Green Vault Museum in Germany. Let's get a little deeper into the research here. The symposium. All right, I'm not going to play all of this, family. I just wanted to show that this guy's a liar. I do want to go to one quick part because I want you all to leave here tonight, because y'all know that we like to do education, right? So I want you all to leave here tonight with the contrast between people that can actually trace themselves back to Indians who enslaved their ancestors, and people like Top Cap, who is a liar, and all of them guys, Mel, Booby, Check, and all of the wannabe Pretendians that rock up under them and Photoshop Indian headdress feathers on their head for Twitter spaces, etc. Like, this is craziness. So one more thing, and we're going to close this thing out. Fort Caroline and the Timucua of Florida, because I believe that's how you really pronounce the name. And it says, selected engravings by Theodore de Bry after watercolors by Jacques Lemoyne de Morgues, artists with the French expeditions to Florida under Jean Rabault, 1562, and I'm going to try to say this French name, and René Goulien de
blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, him, right? Published 1591. These are the images that they show of these people. These are the people this artist went with, this French. Remember that legendary Top Cap said it was the Spanish.
Right.
Remember that, y'all.
Right.
Because Ali Bey said, which Europeans are you talking about? No, it was the French. This guy's a liar. He's
Does
a
he
liar.
ever know what he's talking about?
All right, we could leave it there, family. I just wanted to leave you all with that and give honors to our guests for coming on tonight, and I wanted you all to see a contrast between the actual people that know what they're talking about and the people that lie. They won't come up here and bring their, they won't bring their.
That's a
Ross said I got to work on my French. Yeah, I got to work on my French. Dane Calloway won't come. Legendary Top Cap, he'll come and lie, right? He will come and lie, but we'll shut him down. He hasn't been back since. I called for the debate on Sanetta's channel. Sanetta called me and said, Joe, Abba, it's been a couple days, and Top Cap never hit me back. He said he was doing something with, I don't know, lady friend, white, whatever, and he said he would hit me back. He said he ain't called me back yet. He said, I don't think he want no smoke with you, Lord Abba. Of course, Sanetta, legendary top cap, or his little underling, Ishmael Bey, they want no smoke. We don't got to get ignorant or niggerish. We can just present information, which is what Sister Janai and Brother Ian did here tonight. They showed and proved. So I'm going to.
And the funny thing is about Ishmael Bey, I gotta say,
go ahead.
when the Creek Freedmen banned, Maxine Waters is a supporter of freedmen from Indian Territory and was having this legislative process. There was a legislative process involving Native people going on in housing, and she wanted to include freedmen in it. And there was a lot. That was like the first time in a long time there had been talk in Congress about the treaty rights of freedmen. And so after that, there are several organizations also that we have in Oklahoma for freedmen. And one of them, the Muskogee Creek Indian Band, had a meeting where they were talking about these things that pertain to Indian Territory and to Creek freedmen, not even just to all freedmen from Indian Territory, but to people who were specifically Creek freedmen. And this man was on here trying to steal stuff to use. Ishmael Bey, I saw him in the chat, just listening and watching everything that we were doing. And he has no connection to freedmen, Creek freedmen from Indian Territory.
Right. Hey, Ian, brother, I appreciate you. You are a powerful brother. You are a credit to the Chickasaw Freedmen. You absolutely are, and I honor you, and I honor sister. I honor you as well. I greatly appreciate it. But I want to speak to the Ishmael Bey thing. I am not surprised at all. And I'm glad that you basically revealed that, because, Ishmael Bey, and I was kind of like respectful to him on the show, but he had to, these people are pseudo historians. And one of our shows, and I hope Abba will send you the link. Nyhiem will send you the link. He had the nerve to come on the show and say that the Moors or the Moorish or the Moors were the founders of the Confederacy. And he tried to use the fact that one of the Confederate patriots was a Jew of Moroccan descent to justify that the Moors were the founders of the Confederacy, Confederate States of America. So these are the type of individuals that you're dealing with. They're disingenuous, and they pretty much make up history as they go along. So you're a Moor, you're Indian, you're a Confederate. I mean, these people, it's no low that these people will come to. And
they're doing it to make money. Like, they're doing it to get those hits on social media. They're doing it so people will pay them to do their genealogy and find out stuff that's not true. And they don't agree with what our ancestors said about their own history that they lived, but they try to use our knowledge about it, the knowledge that comes from freedmen, just like they try to use photos of Buck Colbert Franklin, my cousin, and the stuff that we say in our meetings and the stuff we share about our history to make their points in the first place, because they know that they have no history, no community, no place where the knowledge that me and Janai talk about have lived for hundreds of years. There's no place like that. None of these people are connected to those places. And the thing is, like, everything that I shared from you, the reason I'm so knowledgeable is because I listen to my elders. I listen to people in my community. I read the stories of the freedmen who came before me and what they wrote and what they said about their lives. And that's what has made me knowledgeable on my history, not reading the words of white colonizers from the 1700s and then drawing my own conclusions from that. That's not history. That's not anything. That's not information. And
That's
so
right.
even there's so much I've just learned from listening to my ancestors, and like a lot of people in Oklahoma whose grandparents are freedmen, or who are freedmen, and their grandparents, they knew their grandparents who were usually born before Oklahoma was a state. And so we call them the old settlers, like the people who were here before Oklahoma became a state. And those are people our grandma and ancestors, our relatives knew those ancestors. And so there's a lot of knowledge that can be gained from just being in community with people and going back to the places that you come from, where your family descends from, and learning about your relatives there, because they can have knowledge about your family that didn't survive in like your specific line of the family. And we come from such small populations in Indian Territory. Like there were only like 5,000 freedmen, 5,000 Chickasaw freedmen, I want to say, at the time that Oklahoma became a state. No, that might have been after the Civil War. There were 5,000. And so by the time Oklahoma became a state, I think there may have been like, it was 5,000.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it was 5,000.
No, it was 5,000. So when Oklahoma became a state, there were only 5,000 Chickasaw freedmen. There were around the same number of Choctaw freedmen. And so those people in the 1860s had been living in those nations for centuries before that. So they were already very related. Like I'm cousins with people like multiple ways, because like my cousins back home will marry like my cousins from a different line of my family, and they're not like they create my double cousins. Like we're very, very related. And so there's so much knowledge that you can just gain by going back to your community and chatting with your relatives that you like just meet.
And I want to say this, Nyhiem. Oh, I'm sorry, someone was speaking. I'm sorry.
I think Ali wanted to say something on just to the point of these pretendians using things that don't belong to them
to make money, because Brother Ian brought up the fact that they're doing that to make money. Now, it's interesting. If you go to Big Chief University, right, that's his, and I hate calling these people's names, because I don't like giving them any kind of acknowledgement. But when you go to his website, one of the things he does is sells shirts with different types of images on it. Dane Calloway, the same exact thing, right? This particular piece called the Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1990. I don't know if you're familiar with it, brother, but these people actually, as culture vultures, as race shifting culture vultures, are actually selling clothing and different pieces of art that's in violation of this act. It says the Indians Arts and Craft Act of 1990 is a truth in advertising law that prohibits misrepresentation and marketing of Indian art and craft products within the United States. It's illegal to offer, display for sale, or sell any art or craft product in a manner that falsely suggests it is an Indian product, or Indian produced an Indian product, or the product of a particular Indian or Indian tribe or Indian arts and crafts organization resident within the United States. So these people like Dane Calloway, Top Cat, and others who are selling things as if they're Indian art, or T-shirts with Indian images on it, and selling this stuff as to black people as if that's authentic stuff, man. In my opinion, they're in violation of this act. What do you guys say about that?
I definitely think so. I think that they do need to be careful, because I believe that Dan Calloway is being sued right now by an actual indigenous woman.
That's right.
I think that people should take this as a note and not do it, because it's dangerous. You can go to jail. You can go to jail and you can be fined at the same time. So I would just watch out for that.
I think more people should start suing these pictures, because I know Native people, and they've had pictures of their children used. Like their kids are half black, and like they'll have pictures of their kids used like in their power regalia to say, look, the original natives are copper colored Aboriginal people, and they'll put the photo in black and white. There's a tribe in New York, the Shinnecock, and a majority of their members are of African descent. and they will take pictures of those photos from their powwow. Like I know Black natives who don't even want to post themselves wearing the clothing that their ancestors would have worn because they're scared that people are going to take those photos to use against their community and say that they're not the real natives.
Horrible.
Because look at them. So I feel like that's something that like actual native people and like Black natives have to deal with. Like people use photos of my ancestors, people use photos of other people's ancestors, and I think it's very dangerous, and y'all are going to end up getting sued by somebody for using their kids' photos without permission and spreading them all over the internet like a weirdo. And two, with the Indian Arts and Crafts Act, especially when y'all are specifically claiming a tribe, that tribe can come after you because you are not a citizen of that tribe, and they can say, for the fact you're saying that this is a Cherokee item, you're not a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. We got the roll right here. And
Like this guy claims to be Kashada, you know.
Yeah, the Coushatta Nation, like these nations could sue these people, and if they're selling these things claiming that they come from members of those tribes, that's definitely against the Indian Arts and Crafts Act.
People are crazy.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, we came, we saw, we conquered. We do what we do here on Be the Power. We show and prove, unequivocally show and prove. And I want to thank, I couldn't wait to do this stream. We had some technical difficulties in the beginning. And sometimes, you know, the universe works in a certain type of way, right? Maybe it was just meant for us to go on at a certain time so that certain individuals could click on and see it. They wouldn't let us go live for anything at first. I was like, I've never seen this message pop up before. Like, just
I hadn't heard that sound since dial-up when I was like a little kid.
Right?
Like the AOL.
Yeah, that's how we do our little intro. You know, we come on with the little dial-up. Shout out to Sister Cynthia for putting that together for us out of Chicago and the Chicago Freedmen descendants. So, I mean, any final words that you two want to leave the people with? Brother Ian, we'll start with you, and then we'll let the sister go, and we can close this thing out. Let the sister Janai go. Let me make sure I'm saying that right. Janai. Go ahead, Brother Ian.
I'd just say y'all should definitely check out the work of Angela Walton Raji, who's a Choctaw Freedman and one of our elders. And it's like I know a lot, but this woman, she knows so much. And I've like for years have read her work, and it's made me think about things differently that I knew before and really opened my eyes. And so I think everyone should definitely check her work out. Her name is Angela Walton Raji, and also Terry Ligon, who's another elder in our community. His ancestor was involved in Equity Case 7071, which is when Chickasaw Freedmen sued the Department of Interior and the Chickasaw Nation to be transferred to the by blood roll. And all those people who were on Equity Case 7071 had proof that their ancestors were citizens of those nations by blood. My ancestors that were on Equity Case 7071, they had their cousin come who was a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation by blood, who was white and native, to testify for them, saying that they were related. And so there were a lot of people. Buck Clover Franklin's mom too, his mother went to the Choctaw Nation to do the same thing around the time of enrollment. And so like our history is so well documented, and these people have really broken it down in a way that's easy to understand, and they have like a really good depth of knowledge. So I would check out the Chickasaw and what's it called? The Oklahoma Freedmen Collective. So okfreedmen.org for sure. And check out the Angela Walton Raji and her blog, and Terry Ligon and his blog. Me and Janai both have used them so many times. So
all right, can you, Sister Janai, when you get a chance, can you send me the link to the last source that he referenced, so I won't be sitting there trying to spell it out and type it out? I could just click right on it. Yeah, so go ahead, Sister Janai.
So I just wanted to say thank you for the platform. And I wanted to thank my cousin Ian for coming on. I really wanted people to hear what he had to say, because he is a very powerful brother when it comes to the information within the Chickasaw Nation. I hope that somebody found this information reliable, a good source that they can go back to show people that, hey, you know, you can track your ancestors if they were enslaved, you know, by Native Americans. And And that's about it. And also, you know, I hope that people stop pushing this false narrative that African Americans are indigenous to America, because that is a complete lie. It's very dangerous to continue to push this narrative when it's erasing the Aboriginal people of this land. And I really liked it, and I hope that we can do it again.
Indeed, indeed. Well, we definitely will. We definitely will. It needs to be. We need to definitely have a follow up. You know, the people in the chat are loving it. I want to pull up Matt before we close out. I want to pull up Mash X's.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah,
I had seen somebody say something about their grandma lived in Broken Barrel in Norman, Oklahoma. I'm not sure if you can get their information, but I love to talk to them to maybe see if we would be connected in any type of way. Because I know that we did have some family in Norman and in Tulsa. And that's about it.
Indeed, indeed. I'm posting the links that you put in the private chat into the main chat as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That is who Ian was speaking about, Angela Walton and Terry. There's an organization called CCFA Now, I believe. And if you did have ancestors that were enslaved by these 5 slaveholding tribes, you know, we do ask that you fill in that information so that we can be counted for. Because it's a lot of descendants that are not being counted for that were a part of that nation. So if you guys could fill that out, it would be greatly appreciated.
Indeed, indeed. So I wanted to bring this up. Brother Mash X or sister, I don't know, said, good job. I was misinformed about this platform. When you are a purveyor of facts and truth and the things that matter, the people who are purveyors of lies and untruths and things that do not matter at all, well, they are going to spread a lot of misinformation about you. We've had this with all of our freedom fighters, right? If you go all the way back to the Bible, for those who are Christian, they did it with Jesus. Martin Luther King Jr. was called all type of Uncle Toms and sellouts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't until we got better acquainted with the lives of certain individuals like a Martin Luther King Jr., better acquainted with his works, that we understood that this man was, we call him the second freedman king. We call Frederick Douglass the first freedman king, right? So that's gonna happen. And I wanted to just highlight that because, you know, the next comment, they said I was wrong. So basically somebody filled this person's head with a bunch of misinformation about what it is that we do and what it is that we teach over here at Be the Power. And it's not just Pretendians. There's a whole bunch of people that some even call themselves reparationists, et cetera, that, you know, that have that are running around saying certain things. And I'm not going to highlight any of that. I just want people to come to the channel, look at the information, research it, learn for yourselves, and make your own determinations like Mash X did. Ya son, ya black said, that is me, sister. I'm from Los Angeles. If it's a way, I'll give my information.
Yeah, definitely hit me up, because like Ian was saying, a lot of us, you know, when we migrated to Los Angeles. So the presentation that I was showing of my 3rd great grandfather, Richard Davis, one of his grandchildren, she migrated to Los Angeles. So yes, definitely hit me up. Might be Kim.
Okay. What's your email address?
I'll put it in the private channel.
Okay. So I'm gonna put that in there as well. Grim Ali, y'all have anything to say before we get up out of here?
Yeah, real quick, man. Y'all, the curse of Drew. And y'all know what I'm talking about. and I can't leave without holding Noble Drew Ali, or the man that they call Noble Drew Ali, responsible as really the birth parents of the Pretendians. Because like, if you do any research on a lot of Pretendians, you'll find that a lot of those people were followers of different factions that may have branched off for Noble Drew Ali. I refer to it as the curse of Drew Ali, because Drew Ali taught our people a lot of false historical information. And that's my standpoint. And we've proven a lot of things, because we've proven that some of Noble Drew Ali's writings were pro-Confederate when he blamed the black people for Jim Crowism. So, but a lot of the Pretendians, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but a lot of the Pretendians, you'll find that those people basically studied under individuals like Taj Tariq Bey, and actually talking about our people were here, and this is really Morocco, and we the original indigenous Native Americans, and things of that nature. So, I have to hold them responsible, because these Pretendians are really break-offs of these rogue Moorish groups. And I'm not trying to be insulting, but I can prove everything I can say that I'm saying in a respectful manner, without people being mad or violence. But Drew Ali basically left a legacy in which false history is now being taught as historical. So he was kind of like the pseudo father, if you will, of, and I'm not saying everything the man said was bad, but he's the pseudo father of a lot of Pretendianism, by basically pointing out, about us. Y'all remember the name
Living up and down in Mississippi.
Living up and down in Mississippi, and the fact that it was something else he said about the Nicaraguans and all of these, and he said all of these are Muslims. It's actually none of those people were Muslims, because they didn't have no real true missionary Islamic missionaries. But I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I want to lay the blame, you know what I'm saying, down on Taj Tariq Bey. And a lot of these Pretendians are disaffected Moors, man. And that's all I want to say. And
that is a fact.
Sister Janai, Brother Ian, I greatly appreciate you all coming on this show. This was a nail in the coffin for really the false history and really the false narratives. And you all have the documentation that can show who you all really are. And you all, let's just hypothetically say you all wanted to make that claim that you all were here forever, right? You all have more of a claim to say that than a lot of the Pretendians. But you all are not saying that. You all are actually going with true history and true historical records of who you all really are. And you all are our cousins.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like me and Janai, both of our families were on the equity case, so we know for a fact that we have ancestors who are part of the Chickasaw Nation by blood, and our ancestors have been living in those nations for thousands of years. Like they were part of that tribe, just like all of the people who are running around being 1/100th Choctaw are. But like we understand that we are people who are majority of African descent, and our African ancestors live within the Chickasaw Nation, being themselves a majority of African descent. They never had to be anything they weren't, or pretend that they were less African and more native to be who they were. And so we understand ourselves as people who, yes, have lived in this nation for thousands of years, but a majority of our ancestors who lived in that nation came in through slavery, and they're people of African descent. And we have our own unique culture that was built out of that. And I think that is where like our understanding that, yes, like we have been here for thousands of years because we come from this group of native people who have been here for thousands of years. And if they were whatever color, it doesn't matter about the fact that they were on this land for thousands of years. They have names and stories for all these places in Mississippi that I know of and can understand because I speak Chickasaw partly. And so like that is much more important than anything else. And so people skip over all of that to try to make claims about claims through like really weak points. And it's not about that. It's about community, and our families come from towns that are still there. Tatum's is still there. I just went home in February. We go home all the time and visit the communities we come from. I can't wait to go to Teoki. Like it's
in July, guys.
culture.
I encourage people to come to Teoki.
Yeah.
It's something that they only do every 4 years.
I think it used to be every other year. I don't know how it is now, but there are so many all-black rodeos in Oklahoma.
So send us some information, because we might actually try to. I know I might try to travel out there. So make sure y'all link up with me in the back chat, and let's try to make this thing happen. So we're gonna close this thing out.
Indeed, let me say, Nyhiem, I really hope y'all enjoyed it. And I'm a, as they be saying on those Twitter spaces, I just learned this. I'm gonna land my plane. I'm gonna land my plane right here. And man, I appreciate y'all. But I want to say to Logic, I want to say to Ali, Nyhiem, Josh, Roz. I want to Sister Riri, Sister Angela. Y'all forgive me if I missed the
Sister Kelly.
name. Sister Kelly. People are always gonna hate the true teachers, and that's just the bottom line. And I land my plane on that.
Indeed.
Sister
Ali.
Shanna, Sister Cynthia, Brother Arthur Ward, our family in California, Brother Marlon Watson. Come on, man, come on. It's so many great Freedmen family members. But yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for coming on. I enjoyed the conversation. I really am looking forward to us, building on this particular aspect of American history even more, because I think it's needed, particularly coming from people who know what they're talking about, and it's not like pushing a whole bunch of pseudo mumbo jumbo the way so many of these people are doing all over social media. So thank you again, thank you, and let's keep this thing going.
That's right. So, Brother Ian, take us out with a little bit of that Chickasaw language.
I was just about to say, Yakuke Shtu Chipisalacho. Thank you so much. See you later.
That's what I'm talking about. We asked them Pretendians to speak the language, and they start calling us niggas and mother effers and F you and every other.
They start speaking tut. They start speaking tut and shit.
They start speaking mother. They start speaking. So I wanted to end on that. I'll leave you all with the motto of the platform, which is don't just fight the power, become the power. And then and only then will you have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace.